Hello, everyone. I'm Danilo Padilla, and I'm here to discuss, what we discussed about in History 396, which discussed the history of black athletes in America. Basically, what the class discussed was how black athletes in America and how sports pretty much were affected by American society, and how these black athletes and how these sports affected American society as well. Uh, I think that pretty much is a good statement to state why or what we discussed in this class. Maybe the biggest takeaways that I got from this class is how much Black history is not discussed in a typical high school history class or even a college history class, unless you really take a subject that pertains to Black history. I think if we were to look at the curriculum of a typical high school history class, while we discussed topics like the American Civil War, which talks a little bit about slavery, or in the mid 20th century, where we talk about civil rights. For the most part, Black history is not really a primary subject in any history class taught in high school or in college, for that matter. I think that we as a society need to do a better job about this, as African Americans have had a tremendous impact on this country, culturally, politically, and economically. Um, I don't think we discuss them enough, and they need to be discussed more. Another takeaway that I discussed is I don't think I realized how much of an impact sports have an impact, how much sports impact American society, and how much American society impacts sports. I think if you look at the history of sports, much of it reflects the history of America. For instance, Jackie Robinson and the color barrier, or if you look at Jack Johnson and the struggles he went to be able to fight. At the time, African Americans were struggling to get jobs or to be accepted into American society. So I think that speaks volumes. Another example is Colin Kaepernick. At the time in American society, obviously there were protests and things going on to help Black Americans be accepted more into this country, and Colin Kaepernick was doing the same thing on the football field. Um, I think sports, as well as Black athletes, have a tremendous impact on who we are as a society, and I don't think that is talked enough or just noticed enough. A couple things that I don't think that we covered enough was the modern day. While much of the last two modules discuss more current topics, I don't think we discussed enough about the 21st century and how much of an impact that has had. Obviously, I'm a little bit more biased just because I'm younger, but I think if you look at the 21st century, you realize that how much of an impact these athletes like LeBron or Colin Kaepernick, how much of an impact they've had on society, just as much as athletes like Muhammad Ali or Jack Johnson or Jackie Robinson. I don't think that can be understated, and I think we didn't do justice to athletes like that. Um, Another topic that I don't think we discussed about enough was Muhammad Ali. In my eyes, I believe Muhammad Ali is perhaps the most influential black athlete that has existed in American society. I think his life, his career, um, maybe had the most impact out of any black athlete in time. Um, and while we obviously discussed him much, and I think maybe we had a whole module that was mostly about him, I don't think we emphasized much how much of an impact he had on America and on the world, really. Um, for the next part of this discussion, I think I'll talk about the ins and outs of the class, how materials were distributed, and how I learned. I think perhaps maybe the most, or not the most, but the most crucial part of the class, and maybe it wasn't the most impactful, were the lectures. Every time I logged onto this class on Learn, the first thing I did was look at the lectures. And I think that the lectures did a great job of showing um, the basic subject matter. And while it didn't go entirely in depth, and how lectures weren't exactly the longest, they were perfect because they gave great background on what was happening in America during the time that was being discussed, and did a great job of giving a brief and not really shallow, but just brief background on the athlete. These lectures didn't really need to be that in depth because obviously we had other videos and other primary sources in the readings to help with that. But I think these videos did a great job of just presenting the information first and foremost. I think maybe the most impactful form of learning that I went through during this class was the primary sources. These primary sources did a great job of making me feel like I was a part of what was going on then. Like, it made me travel back in time and realize what every other American was going through and helped me get a different perspective on it. I think the news articles did the best job of this. One news article in particular I think did a phenomenal job, and that was the New York Times article on the Black 14. That article really made me feel like I was in America during that time and helped me go through the emotions of what a typical American was going through and see both sides. It helped me show what one side favored at the time and what the other side favored at the time, and helped me find my place on where I was on the subject and maybe where I would have been on the subject, and just gives me a better perspective of what it was. The other most impactful thing that I think helped me were the videos that were posted on the modules. There were videos like I can think of in the last module. There were short YouTube videos, whether it be a first take video on Naomi Osaka or the Black Coaches Roundtable. But these short videos really gave an in-depth analysis while being short and keeping my attention. I think these videos did a great job. But the real videos that I think had a great impact were the ones like the longer documentaries. For instance, the one about the Ken Burns documentary about Jack Johnson, or the Ken Burns video about Jackie Robinson. While at times these videos can seem boring and maybe a little long, I think they did a really good job of helping me out writing my papers and doing things like that. So I think those videos did a really good job of that. The last thing that I want to discuss were the books. While these books were good books, not that I didn't enjoy reading them, I don't think they were entirely in depth and not really necessary. I feel like a lot of the times a quick internet search gave just about the same amount of information that were in the books. But that being said, these books really helped writing with papers. Instead of doing a search for an academic journal or a search for a news article about the subject, I was quickly able to go to the chapter in the book that was being discussed, for instance, a chapter about Muhammad Ali in one of the books, and find all the information that I really needed to write the paper. So that's how those books help, but I also don't feel like those books were entirely necessary. But other than that, I really enjoyed the class, learned a lot. Thought that it was a different class which I enjoyed because it gave a different perspective on history, helped me understand history in a different way, and helped me learn about history from a sports perspective, which I don't think is really done that often. And me as a history major, normally I'm used to the standard history class where you read books about the Civil War or about the French Revolution or whatever, but instead I learned about American history through sports, which was different and exciting and fun. So thank you for all the work this semester. Thank you.